Are we live? We're live? Hi, guys. I'm going to wait for like 2 seconds to get people to come hang out with me because I'm new. I'm really not new. You guys know me. I can hear myself. Hold on, I can hear myself. Oh, wait. Now I know why. Hold on. Okay. Now I can't hear myself. I figured it out. Okay. Hi, guys. Welcome to my first deep dive official with graphics up in the corner that made me nervous. I took some antacids. I forgot to drink my coffee. I had a cup of coffee next to me, forgot to drink it because I got very deep into the weeds with some Jez Staley emails that we'll talk about in a little bit. But we're going to meet each week and talk about some of this Epstein stuff in a deeper dive, kind of round out the week on a Friday afternoon for those who are available. And then obviously repost if you're at work, because I assume that probably a lot of people are at work. So I will do introductions just because I don't assume that everybody has, seen me before. I'm small potatoes. I'm sort of new to this world. I've been writing about Epstein since July. So here we go. Introductions. So my name is Ellie Leonard. I'm an independent journalist. I'm what I call a citizen journalist, and that's kind of what we all are as a co-op and a team together. Is we're all digging through these files. I don't have, journalism student loans. I'm sure that most of you don't have journalism student loans. So we're sort of doing this by the skin of our teeth. And each week we are going to gather and talk about the things that we find and how they are important and how to move forward from them and ways to make this whole process more efficient so that all of us can look at this stuff together. We can look at it at different levels of tech, right? I don't expect that everybody knows how to use Reddit or Discord or things like that. So ways that we can look at it in a more simplified manner and organize things so that they're easy to understand. Because here's the deal: before these files were dropped, we were told that they were dragging their feet because they were redacting survivors' names out for the protection of them. Obviously, now we know that that is not true. But also, there are roughly 1,000 people working at the FBI going through these files. So if you think of, now we have 3.5 million pages. If you think of that with 1,000 people, they're going pretty quick. They're not giving these a real heavy look-see. Now, step over the side of the line into the citizen journalism world. How many people do we have looking through these files? Millions and millions and millions of people. We are going to see the things that they miss. We are going to point things out. We are going to make better connections. Um, and that's why we do this. And I don't think there's any way for them to keep up with that. And that's why I believe that they are withdrawing documents as we see every day. They're pulling them back. So the idea for this week is we are going to put on our capes. We are going to help write this story. We are going to write an end to this story. And we're going to try to find some justice for these survivors and hold the bad actors to account. So that is the goal, right? That's why we're all here together. So a little bit, I'm jumping ahead, but I feel like I got the time. Just for those of you who've never seen me or met me or talked to me before, which I try to talk to everybody when I can. I am a writer. I have been on Substack for a little over a year, maybe a year and a half. I came here to write fiction. I have 2 books, and I was in the publishing process, and it just wasn't going very well. I had an agent for a little bit. There's something called submission where you're hawking your book out to all these different publishers. You have good days and bad days, but ultimately it's a whole bunch of rejection, and you sort of learn to ride that wave. Ultimately, I lost my literary agent and I had to figure out what to do next. And it was, pre-election, things were getting very passionate and heated. And I'm raising 4 kids and trying to figure out how to be a good advocate for them and teach them things in the way that they'll understand for their age range. And somebody that I know who's very near and dear to me mentioned that I should try Substack and just write for the sake of writing, like hone your skill, write from a place of passion, be an advocate for different groups of people, and don't be seeking a publishing deal. Just write because you love to write, because ultimately that's the point. So I came to Substack And I, at the time, had a small business, and I still do, called Red Pencil Transcripts. And I had been working for over a decade in like a subcontract role with places like the New York Times and the LA Times and a lot of filmmakers and independent journalists and different things like that, where I would transcribe their interviews so that they could either piece them together for a film or a podcast, or if it was a longer piece like the Weinstein story, or there was a big piece on Kanye West and like his time at Adidas and all the anti-Semitism and crazy stuff that went on. Those pieces take months and months and months to write. And so it was my job to listen to all the interviews, type them up, and then they can data mine those interviews for their articles. I did that for a very long time. I did that for years. I was very proud of that business. I got to work with, from my couch, I got to work with people like the Obamas and Harry and Meghan and Patton Oswalt and Mia Farrow, and just a great group of people. And I learned a lot. It was like a free college education from my tiny little couch in Western Montana at the time. And eventually, though, AI really took over the work that I did. And it started to decrease the amount of calls that I got. And so eventually I'd start calling clients and say, hey, do you have more projects? Are there things that I can work on? Do you have any assignments? And they said, we're sorry, but like we can now do this for free. And it's like with the click of a button, we just have to press a button and the whole thing is done. Whereas you cost this much and it takes a couple of weeks. I mean, you can't compete with that. And so I really lost most of my business to AI. So I'm sort of one of those stories that, doesn't really like AI all that much. I find that there are necessary portions of it, but most of them not so much. And so I went back to work after like 14 years of not working outside my house. I went back to work and I started Substacking and I started writing. And then all of a sudden, I'm, in Montana. I'm at my folks' house for the summer. We're visiting. And, politically, we are on two different sides of the aisle. And there are times when I feel very frustrated because I feel like there is a lack of information or just lack of wanting to discover information. And so my time spent there, I began to write like a lot. And one of the things I was writing about was the connection between Epstein and Trump, and like what is documented, like what can we actually find, what are conversations that really happened, what are court records, what are photographs, like how much stuff do we really have? And this is like way back. There were not a lot of files for us to look at. I think this was before like most of the files. And I really didn't know a lot about Epstein. So I thought, okay, we'll just make this timeline and just see where we go with it. And I put it all together, and it was a lot, by the way, lots of times that they were hanging out. And I documented everything. I cited everything to show like these are legitimate sources. And then I just put it on Substack, one of many articles that I expected not very many people to read. And it was my first, relatively viral thing that I'd ever done. People were very interested in it. I figured out from there, maybe this is something people want to know more about. So I started writing about certain aspects of the Epstein files, not things that were breaking news necessarily, but things like the Dalton School, things like Bear Stearns, things like following the money trail, things like relationships, like specific relationships, or what happened with Robert Maxwell, who was found floating in the Atlantic naked, after falling off his boat in the middle of the night, right? Like things like that weren't the breaking news. When we think of things, especially now when new file sets are dropped, there's breaking news. There's things that are real buzzwords, hot items. I like to wait and I like to dig. And so that's what I did. And I just really found that people enjoyed these stories because they're true. And we're asking for more. And I thought, okay, I can write about this. I can do a little research and look this stuff up. And so I did. And it just built and built and built. And eventually I was able to quit my job, which was really, really wonderful. I'm very grateful for that. And just go home and work full time on this and other projects that have to do with advocating for people and telling stories and getting the word out in the best way that I can do. And so that's what I've been doing. I think a lot of this stuff resonates for me. There's a couple of reasons. I am someone who, through my work and through projects like working on the Woody Allen story and working on some of these, the Weinstein story, this is not my first rodeo. People ask me a lot about my mental health and how I handle going through a lot of this dark material. And I think, for better or for worse, I've developed a thick skin to the material. I don't necessarily have a thick skin when it comes to being in front of a camera. That is something that I'm working on. But as far as these things that I have to read and sift through, I can still shut everything down, put my kids to bed at night, sleep well, not get anxiety, not get nightmares. Like I handle it really well. It took time to get there. I used to work on a lot of legal cases that had to do with child abuse, and that was really tough in the beginning. And I had to talk to a lot of people about that. But now I've been doing this long enough, and I think this is the same thing when you deal with people who work in law enforcement, like who see the worst of the worst. Eventually, they learn to work through it, and it's not because it doesn't matter, and it's not because they're immune to the feelings of it. They just know that their position and what they're doing is something working toward the good. And despite how hard and heavy it is, you're working towards something better. You're working towards something that's helpful. And for me, I have the added benefit of not being triggered by some of these things, which many, many, many people are. There is a history, especially, for me being a kid from the 90s, like there's a history of a lot of kids being sexually abused. And, whether that's due to a lack of supervision or that we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have the ability to call for help. There wasn't an environment of being believed as much. I don't know, but probably half my friends were sexually abused. And I've been a kid who, for whatever reason, people approached and talked and told me their stories and felt safe with, and I'm glad about that. But I also know that being someone who isn't triggered by those things gives me a responsibility to be someone who digs through them and tells that story so that other people don't have to. Not everyone needs to be looking at these files. There are people who have been through horrific, horrific situations, and I don't recommend them looking at them. I don't think they should. I think part of this story is um, the health and well-being of survivors. And if you are a survivor, then I want that for you, and I don't want you digging through these files. And so people will have to make the decision for themselves if they feel like that is something that is damaging for them, because it's not a necessary it's not something that we have to do because we're fighting the system or we are trying to help these survivors. You do not have to do this in order to help. There are other ways to help. Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit. And then just the other thing is, like, why do I do it? Like, why is it important to me other than the obvious? Like, it's a terrible, terrible story. And just the basic, like, baseline of protecting children, which I think we're all pretty much there. I would assume you don't have to have children to know that you want to protect children. But also, like, we've seen a lot of things change in the last year. We've seen a lot of our rights taken away. We've seen, we talk about a lot how the rights we had when we were kids are like better than the rights that our kids have going into the world. And again, I have 4 kids. I have 4 kids entering this world. They are, all different personalities, but we live in a place where all their friends are immigrants, and we think about these things. We talk about these things. We have family members who are LGBTQ that we think about and we talk about and we express. And so as I, lovingly push my children into the world, I want the world to receive them in a manner that is protective of them and that loves them and that provides them with rights. And so I think part of doing this project and writing about these things is, you know, giving my children to a world that doesn't take from them but gives to them, and that they have the same rights or more that I had when I was their age. And that's just the goal. So I think about that a lot. I think about that as something, if we're working on creating accountability for bad actors despite their, you know, tax bracket, that in the future, if you have $1 billion, it won't matter. If you do something bad, you will be prosecuted by somebody with no money. Like everybody would be on equal footing. You do something wrong, you will have a consequence for that. And that should make sense. I feel like that's so simple, but people don't get it. So I just wanted to talk about, we have all been digging, and some of the things that we've found, there's a lot of super important stuff. So I will try. I'm not going to get through all of this, but people ask, like, what are we looking for in the files? Everybody's looking for something different. Something that I really lean into is the emails. I really love analyzing the conversations of people who did not know people would be listening and watching. Like, I really, really love that, because there are times when their guard is up, but there's times when their guard is really, really down. And in those moments, you start to see who these people are. You see, lately I've been going through a lot of like the Jez Staley emails, and he was second in command at JP Morgan. His boss is Jamie Dimon. And you start to realize that the dynamic between him and Jeffrey Epstein was flipped, right? He was supposed to be managing Epstein's finances, when in fact, Epstein was managing JP Morgan through Jez Staley. Well, Epstein had 134 bank accounts at JP Morgan. Nobody is supposed to have 134 bank accounts. Huge red flag, big umbrella for sex trafficking. That was, when they've done court cases later, they did investigations through the US Virgin Islands versus JP Morgan. All of this was pretty plain and simple, that there were red flags for sex trafficking, but JP Morgan ignored those, continued to let him get more and more bank accounts where they would be in the name of these girls. And they were all Eastern European girls. They weren't the American girls. They were the Eastern European girls. They didn't have to be in the room with him when he started a bank account for them. They did not have to have their birthday on the account. They did not have to have an ID on the account. They did not have any kind of like a social security number, version for whatever country they came from. They didn't have to have any of that. JP Morgan just let Jeffrey Epstein start an account for a child who was not in the room. I don't know about you guys, but I recently took my daughter to get a bank account. We were there for an hour and a half. We had to bring in multiple forms of identification and passports and social security numbers, and they had to ask her questions and ask me questions, and they had to background and verify. It's complicated. And she's my child. Like, legally, she's my child. I have all the documentation to show that she's mine. We still were there for 90 minutes. Jeffrey Epstein's pressing buttons and he's getting bank accounts. He was not paying girls through these bank accounts. That was not what he was doing. When he was getting bank accounts for girls in Eastern Europe, it's because he was funneling money back to whatever countries they came from. And that was the intent. He would pay these girls. The girls that were getting paid from massages, he was paying them in cash because he didn't want a paper trail. So it's like, that is something very apparent through the emails. That is something very apparent through these court cases. Did they do anything about it? No. Did Jamie Dimon do anything about it? No. Jamie Dimon claims he never met Epstein, except we have emails asking Jamie Dimon what kind of snacks he wants when he comes over to Epstein's house tonight, right? That's what the files are good for. That is what we are learning. That is when the guard comes down. And so that is what I'm looking for. When I am up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm texting people, sorry if I wake anybody up, that is why. It's because something has popped up in an email, and that is like a moment of gratification, because those are the receipts. When I say receipts, receipts are what we all need to be looking for. What are receipts? Receipts are evidentiary information, right? Something we can look at, something with a file number on it that proves the thing that somebody else said a long time ago, right? If a survivor, like let's say Maria Farmer, makes a claim that she filed an FBI report in 1996, and the FBI says the entire time, no, you didn't. We don't have an FBI report. Who are you, Maria? What? And then all of a sudden we open up these files and there's an FBI report filed by Maria Farmer in 1996. That is a receipt. Not only does that give her proof, right? That proves her story that we already believed, But it also shows that the FBI did not do their job, right? Which is one of the bigger stories here. The FBI has had all of this information for decades, the stuff that's shocking us when we filter through and we go, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Oh, he's watching torture videos. Oh, da, da, da." They've had this for 30 years. They didn't do anything about it. Like multiple administrations, nothing. There were investigations, but not like what we are doing right now. Okay, another example. We have Annie Farmer's journals, right? When you have accusations in a journal of a 16-year-old child, before anybody who knew who Jeffrey Epstein was, right? That gives them credibility, right? It's not 2020 or, it's not August 2019 and all of a sudden someone comes forward and says, "Me too, I have something on Jeffrey Epstein," which could still be credible. It's somebody who was in 1996 when nobody knew Jeffrey Epstein from Adam. I didn't. I was 14. Now you know how old I am. And you have this child with a diary saying, "These are the things that Jeffrey Epstein did to me. I'm very uncomfortable. I'm at a movie theater. He's sticking his hand like up my leg. Um, and I feel uncomfortable because he says he wants to pay for my college and now I don't know what to do." Right? These are things that she has said. This is the story we have heard in interviews, in documentaries. This is what she's been saying the entire time. And yet here are her journals from 1996 that pop up in these files. That is a receipt. Another receipt that we didn't know we needed, excuse me, is you think of Virginia Giuffre. Virginia Giuffre, even in death, Virginia Giuffre was very diplomatic. She didn't always name everybody. You can follow trails, you can ask questions, and you can figure out who she's talking about. She talks about a billionaire and his wife who was pregnant. That was the Dubins, right? She talks about a prime minister who attacked her. That was Ehud Barak. Like, these are things that I can go and I can do my research. I can look through court cases and I can find the names. Okay, two things that happened to Virginia Giuffre. Number one, this one is very important to me because I found this a while back and I just kind of want to shout it on a bullhorn. One of the men that she accused of abusing her was Alan Dershowitz, who was Epstein's lawyer. He's a very well-known ambulance chaser of the rich and famous, putting it nicely. I don't like the guy. And then he became Trump's lawyer, right? He flipped. Epstein then hated him. That's a longer story. He was somebody that she sued, or in her lawsuits, she accused. Let's put it that way. She said that he was one of the men who abused her at Epstein's house. He then countersued, saying that she, in simpler terms, the defamation, this is not true, she's lying, blah, 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 blah. In countersuing her, he also he unsealed her court documents, which then showed Ehud Barak was the prime minister, which was helpful, but also, Dershowitz is, crap bag. So he then countersues her, and then all of a sudden, she comes out and she makes a statement and she says, "I didn't actually see Dershowitz there. I made a mistake. I was traumatized. I was young. I misidentified him." And then in her book, she does that again. She says it again. She's never said that about anybody else that she has accused. And I know that a lot of people who have come and talked to me who are survivors said it's very, you can block things from being traumatized, but most people will remember the face of the person who abused them. Not always, but it's pretty common. I never sat well with that. I thought, she has all these people that she's accused. We have pictures, we have timelines. Why is that the one person that she recanted? Very wealthy, very prominent, very powerful lawyer. Why would that be? Well, I had my druthers, but time passed and I thought, well, maybe or maybe not. We will find that out. Who knows? A few months ago, I was digging through one of the sets of the files. I don't even know which set it was. I think it was probably in November or like early. And I'm going to bed, it's late, and I find an email And this email is from Alan Dershowitz, and it is to Virginia's lawyer, David Boies. And in it, he says verbatim to her lawyer, this is what she has to say. And in summary, this is how she's going to clear me. He gives him 2 sample versions of the things she can say to clear him and clear his name. Lo and behold, these are the things that she says. And so now I have a receipt. I have the thing that shows that Dershowitz was telling Virginia Giuffre what she had to say to clear his name. Not that she was doing it from the bottom of her heart, because I don't think any of us thought that, but that she was being forced to say it. And I'm sure she was being threatened. I'm sure she was being threatened financially. And if you read her book, she was not a rich person. She did not make a lot of money from these cases. She was still working like 9-to-5 jobs. She could not afford to go up against Alan Dershowitz. So that's a receipt. Another receipt. Virginia Giuffre starts talking about surveillance rooms. She says that Epstein's paranoid. She says, somebody said that Wexner was paranoid. I don't remember if it was Virginia or not, but I do know that Leslie Wexner was paranoid. He is the man who owned all the houses that Epstein owned prior to giving them to him for like tuppence. As far as I can tell, he really just gave him the houses, and Epstein had to pay for like the title transfer, and I can't really, there's nothing else. He didn't pay for anything else. But Leslie Wexner was a very paranoid person. Epstein kind of grew into this paranoia, and there were pinhole cameras all over the houses, right? Which is something that was widely denied. But there were pinhole cameras in every room of every house. And Virginia Giuffre said, well, I know that there were cameras everywhere, and I know there was a surveillance room, right? I know that there was a room filled with monitors and a desk, and somebody would surveil the house or go over the footage and just make sure everything was on the up and up. And then she talks about like boxes and boxes of VHS videos, which we assume were probably used for some, we talk about blackmail, we talk about, just gross like fantasy stuff. Like there was boxes and boxes and boxes of videos. In July, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Epstein's sort of second in command, his sometimes girlfriend, he had a version of her all the time that were different women. She obviously went to prison in 2021. She was in the prison in, I think, Florida, in a women's prison. It was I think it was a low security prison. Is that the term? She is given a proffer from Todd Blanche. A proffer is like a deposition. It's an interview, but it's a tit for tat. It says, if you tell us these things, then we will give you this stuff. In that, she says, okay, he didn't have any cameras. There's no such thing as the surveillance room. It doesn't exist. Okay, fine. We'll believe you, Ghislaine Maxwell. No, we don't. Todd Blanche believed her. He moved her then to a minimum security prison, which is then a step down. That's how she got a puppy. And now she's in Texas. Well, lo and behold, we open up the files, and wouldn't you just know it, there's a picture of a security room. And it's the same room that has the painting of Bill Clinton in Monica Lewinsky's blue dress and the red heels, like wherever that painting came from. It's the same room. We have all the monitors, we have the desk, we have the chair, we have the setup for surveilling the entire house. That's what she said. We have a receipt. We have a picture. We also have a receipt that Ghislaine Maxwell is a liar. Surprise. Okay. So, what should we talk about? Okay. Let's talk about how you can help. I think a lot of us are already digging. The cool thing about this drop of the files that happened, a week ago? Yeah, a week ago. I was in an Uber in New York City, and of course they dropped 3.5 million files, and I couldn't do nothing about it. Something different that just feels different this time around is all of a sudden everybody is investigating. And so that means that not only is it me and people are kind of bringing me stuff and showing me stuff, but now everybody is figuring out how to look through these files. I am probably on, 25 different signal threads now with people and groups. I have four, I think I have four email addresses. I need to whittle that down. But like, there are so many people digging. People come to me and they say, can I dig too? Am I qualified to do this? I don't think I can do it. And what I tell them is this: I'm not qualified to do it, right? We shouldn't be qualified to do it. We shouldn't have to do it. The fact that we are investigating a federal investigation of sex trafficking, right? As citizens, that's what we're doing because no one else would do it, right? Because it is so entrenched in politics, it is so entrenched in finance, it is so entrenched in money, and it's so entrenched in the president of the United States that nobody had the balls to do it. And so that left us. But there's millions of us, right? There's only 1,000 of them. And they didn't see that coming. They did not see that coming. And so now here we are. Here we are digging through these files, and people come to me and they say, I need you to validate that I'm qualified to do this. So I'm here to validate that you are qualified to do this. Everybody's schedule is different. Everybody's time of day that they have to do this kind of thing is different. You know, if you have 5 minutes, if you have an hour, like if you have kids running around your house or babies or God forbid toddlers, love my toddlers, but whew, if you have a lack of time, then that's okay, right? You're just paying attention. The thing that you could maybe do is if somebody sends you something, just look it up before you send it along. Like make sure things are things. There are something, you know, I see a lot of pictures from a lot of well-meaning people that I know are AI, right? They'll say, here is a picture of Jeffrey Epstein on a beach surrounded by little boys. That never happened. That picture was never taken. And it just takes a little bit of research to find out that this is a photo that was created by AI. It's really, really, really important that we know what we're passing along, what we are putting on social media, because in order to validate these stories of survivors, we have to be honest, and the things that we have to put out are honest. And there are different ways to do that. For example, I saw another picture of Donald Trump and Epstein surrounded by some girls in a bedroom. And it might even have come from the files. I don't know where this picture came from. Um, and people were saying this is not AI, this is a really true picture. But the thing that you can look at in the picture is the age range between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. And you say, oh, Jeffrey Epstein doesn't have gray hair in this picture, so that would have to be before this year. Well, I can go look at a picture of Donald Trump's face before that year, and he did not look as old as he does in this picture. That's an older picture of Donald Trump. So therefore, this picture has been piecemealed together, however they did that. That's a really simple thing to kind of look up and just make sure, because again, if we are going to get the bad guys, we have to be really, really, really sure and careful and honest with the things that we put out in the world, and do our homework. And we won't always get it right, you know, and be open to mistakes. When somebody says, hey, I saw that you wrote this, I saw that you said this, but I think I can counter that. I think I found something else out. I saw a post the other day where people were really concerned about Epstein. It was an email saying something about a 9-year-old, right? And people kind of went like, oh my God, a 9-year-old. But this was an email that was filled with these little like equals signs, and you'll see that. And that is just kind of like it's a poorly coded version of an email. And usually you can look up the same email in the DOJ website and get a better version of it. But you'll see these little equal signs that take out a letter and put in an equal sign in place of a letter. So in that email, they were actually talking about a 19-year-old, which is still gross. I mean, let's be honest, it's still gross, but it's not a 9-year-old. So we have to be really clear about that. We have to be really careful about that when we further that information, that this email, I can find it again, I can show it again. And here it clearly shows me he's talking about a 19-year-old, which is disgusting. I mean, he was like 60, but it's legal. So that is not going to be a case where we can go, this is one of these, you know, we need to figure out who sent this email. So that is, you know, that is just something that important to pay attention to. Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about like, how do we organize? And this is something that we may need to put our heads together, because I want to look at everything that you guys have, but I'm not always able to do that, obviously, right? We've grown as a group. We've really, really grown. And so, um, it was hard for me because I've always placed a lot of importance on connecting and answering emails and checking in with people and like having real conversations. And it got to a point where I didn't know how to do that. And I felt like I was falling behind and I was becoming just this like, I don't know. I was becoming something I didn't want to be. I don't want to be like a face on a platform that nobody can talk to and is superficial or doesn't exist or whatever. And so I still try to do check-ins, but I can't always answer everything that I get. I do try to like scroll through and make sure I don't miss the important stuff. That's really important to me, but I have to recognize what I'm capable of and but also leave time to actually look through these files, right? Because that's ultimately what we all need to be doing. And so we need to figure out as a team, as we are now this giant co-op of citizen journalists, this is what we are. Whether you knew it or not, this is what you are. We need to figure out a way to organize the information that we have that's all in one place. And it's something that's accessible, again, for people who are not highly techy. I always, before this, when I was writing about Project 2025 or like the big, beautiful bill, the point I always tried to make with my writing was making information easy to understand and accessible to everyone because I've always felt that that is the reason we landed where we did in the election, um, with like ICE and like everything that's going on is because people, some people are sticking their heads in the sand, but a lot of people don't understand or they don't have access to information. And so I try to make things as easily accessible as I possibly can. And you also have to think about that can be like on a reading level, that can be on a tech level, that can be on an accessibility level for people with disabilities. Like you just have to find a way that everyone can reach out and actually find the things that you are talking about and then go from there, right? Sorry, I want to make sure I can see your comments here. And so we need to figure out what that looks like. If it's like a singular website where we're kind of categorizing our information, um, if it's its own Substack of just like an info dump. I really like the Jmail. If you guys have been into the Jmail, which is basically like a Gmail, but it's a Jmail. It is all of Epstein's emails, and whoever is doing that is absolutely a genius. I don't really know how they're doing that. Sorry, I'm trying to do all this at once. And so we have to figure out what that is and what that looks like, because I think if it's just me and I am the only one responding, I'm probably not going to be your best source. I will try, but I'm also digging as well. And so I want to make sure that we all have access and we can all answer each other's questions. If you're on Signal, Signal has been amazing. I am watching, like from the sidelines, I'm watching these groups of people find amazing things and meet new people and become communities of like these late night diggers, these early morning diggers. And they are starting to really, really find things that I probably wouldn't have gotten to. And that also has to do with, if I share my Dropbox and I say, here are all the files, I don't think we all need to be searching in the same place. These are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of files. And again, overall, supposedly 3.5 million files. Haven't counted them. So I never, never, never recommend people start at the beginning. I say pick a number. I mean, they have all these little folders, and I'm busy combining them into PDFs so that you don't have to look at one picture at a time. But just pick one. Pick one, make a Word document, make a notes on your phone, and just say, I'm working in this folder, and on this page of this folder, this is what I found, right? And then we can put that info dump in one place, and then somebody else doesn't need to look through that full same folder. That way we have more people looking through these files faster, and we can get to more information in a better way, right? Quicker, better, more simple. Ellie's not up at 4 a.m. That's what I was doing last time, 4 a.m. And that was only 30,000 files, but that was overwhelming. Don't recommend that to anybody, but I wanted to find these answers. I wanted to find these emails. I wanted to Every day when I'm digging through these things and it's 4 a.m. and I'm tired, I think that some billionaire is like sleeping in his big poofy bed. And, you know, we live very near Teterboro Airport. I see these same Gulfstream planes like Epstein owned. They fly over my house. I think about that stuff. And so I think of like, it's 4 a.m., time is being spent. We're missing this. We need to get this. I really also think that the clock is ticking because we have the midterms coming up in November. I think there's going to be fireworks. I really do. I think that's going to change almost everything. Um, if things can go well, then we'll start to see accountability. We'll start to see actual true investigations. And then maybe we can start to use this information that we found towards those. So that would be really, really cool. But I think this next year is going to show us, it's going to be our make or break. And I really, I really hope that we see an end to this story. That's all I want. Okay. I wrote a paper for Blue Ant Media, and it was published this morning. And Lawrence may have to remind you what it's called, because now I'm not looking at it. I don't remember the title of it. I apologize. But you can look on my Substack and find it. But basically, it is this. As we've seen in the last week, a week ago, there it is. Thank you. As we've seen in the last week, as with always, journalism is targeted. This is not the first time, but it is harder and faster and more meaningful this time. People are targeted for literally just showing what's already there. So you think of everybody who was arrested last Friday, however you feel about entering a church, the people who were arrested were literally just there with cameras on. People who were on January 6th in the Capitol, literally there with cameras on. Like, journalism has always been targeted. There are some really great documentaries by Rowan Farrow out there that talk about a lot of that stuff. But what you need to think about right now is what you have and what you've been given and how to protect yourself, right? I don't think most of us have a legal team backing us. I think that's probably far, far in the future, if ever. But we have these files. And when last Friday, everybody was downloading them as fast as fast as they could go. All of a sudden, people started to realize that there were folders that were fully unredacted. And while that's great, and we want to know who the bad guys are, they were still redacted. The things that were unredacted were the things that you need to redact and to protect the survivors. And a lot of that was like illegal stuff. It's children. It's things that we are not meant to see. No one is meant to see. Unfortunately, like, law enforcement have to look at, but they were ending up in these files that we were downloading. And, whenever somebody found that, immediately sent out the warning, hey guys, there's something, it's called CSAM. It's CSAM. And somebody will have to remind me what that stands for, but it basically means documentation of child abuse, and it's not redacted. And whenever somebody sent out the warning, everybody deleted everything, right? Do not want that on your computer. You do not want that in your home. And you don't know where it is, right? It's a million files, and it could be right in the middle. Like, we're not aware that it exists, but we're not supposed to have that version of the files, right? We were given the version we were supposed to have, and yet that version went out. Why? Well, there's only one place that version can come from, and that is the DOJ. Nobody else had that. Nobody else has unredacted photos of victims. They just don't have them. I do know that another journalist reached out to me and said, have you seen this file? And it wasn't child abuse, but it was literally a folder filled with girls ages 14 to 17, their headshots, unredacted, all their driver's licenses, all their personal information, unredacted, the entire file, right? They told us we didn't have these files because they were busy redacting survivors. They were not. Every email has the email address redacted. Everything that talks about co-conspirators has the co-conspirators redacted. And we have found many unredacted survivors in these files because that was not the point, right? We always say it, cruelty is the point. But if we receive the wrong set of files and we have something that contains child abuse material and it goes onto our personal computers, then that leaves us open to prosecution, right? That leaves us open to legal problems, that leaves us open to reputational problems, and we may never know it even exists or that it's there. And that is something that was done very purposefully. They are targeting journalists with that information to effectively stamp us out. And that sucks. It sucks. It's not going to stop any of us, but it sucks. And so with that in mind, and I talk about this, if you want to read the article, you can, protect yourself, right? Talk to people who are looking at the same files as you. If anybody finds something that they know is unredacted child abuse, sound the alarm, tell your people, say, remove this immediately, so that everybody can delete. Because, and then you need to contact the DOJ and say, this version has child abuse in it. Like, what are you doing? And that is what that journalist did when they reached out to me. They said, you gave us fully unredacted victims, and obviously they're unprotected with this in the files, and the DOJ removed it. They're busy removing a lot of other things as well, but they were not removing that. So that is something to really bear in mind, because I want us all to stay safe. I know we're all doing this for the right reasons, and that's just something that we're going to have to be really careful about. Okay, we're going to start answering some questions in these last few minutes, because that's the best part of the day. Okay, so from Katie Spain. Ellie, which administration started investigating Epstein? Clinton? When did they stop? Toward the end of Biden? I believe, I don't know when they started. That's a great question. I don't know when they started. I do know that Biden had an open investigation into the Epstein files. It was open, and it was closed on January 20th, 2025. What else happened on January 20th, 2025? I believe that was Inauguration Day. So there was an open investigation. I don't know how thorough it was. I don't know how intense it was, but it was open, and it got closed the day Trump went into office. So that is something to think about. I can tell you that Biden is nowhere in the files so far. From Sylvia, how can we join in to read the files and help? Thank you, Sylvia. That is a great question. I think that is my most asked question that I hear every single day. There are a lot of ways you can help. The main way, and I can do this afterwards when we post this live, and I can also just do it in my notes. I have a link to files in Dropbox. So when these documents were dropped last week, most of us downloaded them to a Dropbox because we know that the DOJ will immediately start deleting stuff, which is kind of what they do. They realize they missed something and they start to delete things that shouldn't be deleted. So most of us download the files, which is why I'm being so careful about making sure that nothing is in them that leaves us open to legal problems. And so what I do is I can just send you the link, and it doesn't matter if you don't have Dropbox. It doesn't matter if you don't have a big Dropbox. You can literally just click the link, look in my Dropbox, and just start looking at the files from there and just start scrolling them and just pick one. Just pick one that works for you. I guarantee you one file. And this is not, so they have something called batch 9, batch 8, batch 10, batch 11. Those are not the files. In those, you have something called natives, which are usually like videos. You have something called images. And in the images, you will have 500 folders. And in those folders, you will have 1,000 documents. So think about this. Think about the numbers and how big these get. When you open those images, so you have 500 folders with 1,000 images each. Like, an image doesn't necessarily mean it's one page. It could be multiple pages. This is an immensely huge project, and it's a lot of digging. And you will never see probably the same thing that somebody else does, but sometimes you will. Sometimes there are duplicates. You'll see that if you look up, if you're trying to find the source of something, if somebody shows you a letter and you want to make sure it's real, you can go look for it on the DOJ they have a little Epstein search bar. You will find, if you're looking up an email and you want to look up like a unique phrase in the email, emails will be posted like 5 times in the files, 10 times, same email over and over and over again. So there are duplicates. And that's how you find sometimes an unredacted version of something that you had only redacted. So that's sometimes very helpful. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. So Sylvia, I will be posting a link to my Dropbox on Substack after this so that you can click it, you can open it up, you can pick a folder and just start scrolling and keep notes. Keep notes of which folder you're in, and if you find something that you think is interesting, make a note, make a page number, and then you can go back and look at it at the end. But that's basically what I'm doing. Okay, from Christy Robinson. Are we done talking about Sasha, and if so, why? Oh, that's a big one. So for now, it has gone a little bit quiet. That's still being investigated. I know behind the scenes, I know one private investigator that is working on that I've talked to a little bit offline. Yeah, I don't necessarily know what is happening with that story. I did a deep dive myself on it. I was approached by the author of that story at the beginning of November. I think with the intent of having me write it. I don't know if that was her intent, but that's what it felt like she was asking. I didn't feel comfortable writing it just because there were a few things in it that I couldn't, again, like I'm going back to saying with what we put out on social media and what we write, there were things I couldn't verify, and there were things that I disproved. And that doesn't mean the story is not true, but I just wasn't comfortable presenting all the information until she had more evidence. She had a list of evidence that she was looking for, and I said, if we can get any of that, that would be really helpful, and then we can, really start to dig and verify for some of these things. And I don't think at this point we have, but that doesn't mean that it's not true. I always give survivors the benefit of the doubt, and I think that's important so that they know that they have a safe platform to come to and talk to. But for now, I'm not really sure on a whole what is happening with that story. I don't know. So, right. We're closing in, guys. First episode. Look at us. Okay. Okay, Clinton. Can I just pick one? I'm just going to pick one. Okay, from Sylvia. How do we get the information to you when we find something? So that is an important question. So that kind of goes back to what I was saying before. You may not want to give it to me. You can, but I'm just one person, and right now we have thousands of people searching for things, and I do sometimes get overwhelmed by the amount of information that people bring back to me because I can't look at all of it, and I can't give it the attention that it needs. I really encourage you, if you feel comfortable enough doing so, to be your own bullhorn for this information, to do the same thing that I'm doing it and start posting and talking about it and linking to people and saying, pay attention to this and look at this. Joining, if you're on Signal or if you're in something, if you have some social media platform where you can have a group thread and start talking to people about this stuff. That is the concept of the co-op, right? The co-op won't necessarily work if it's everybody and then sort of me in the center filtering everything, because we're all working together. But the idea of all of us sharing information with everybody, and so that we can verify, and then we can all filter this information, and then we all can, create these threads of information. Like for me, the thing that I focus on is emails. I know that that's not everybody's focus. Other people are focused on specific characters from the story. Like somebody might be looking into just Larry Summers, or somebody might be looking into just the money side of things, or Ehud Barak, who is the Prime Minister of Israel. People focus on individual portions of the files because it's really all you can do, because it's so much information. So I don't necessarily recommend having everything go through me, because I may not see it, or see it in time, or see it and give it the fullest response that it deserves. And I really think this information, instead of coming in, needs to go out. But if you feel like you're just not, on a lot of social media, you feel like you don't have the technical know-how to present that everywhere, then yeah, I can look at it. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. Let's see. I know Bill Clinton is brought up a lot. I'm going to say one thing before I answer that next question. Because Bill Clinton is brought up a lot. Now he is going to speak. This is how I feel about Bill Clinton. I don't really know why we glorify him as Democrats. I haven't ever really understood that. I think Monica Lewinsky is a powerhouse. She is very high on my bucket list of best friends. But I do hope, if there's anything that went on, kind of like we're seeing with Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, and she finally feels powerful and safe enough to speak. I hope that Hillary Clinton will feel strong enough to separate herself from her husband, because damn it, it is time. That woman has been through a lot for him. And it's her choice, right? It's her life and it's her safety and it's her comfort zone. But I hope she doesn't continually throw herself under the bus for him. That being said, I have looked at a lot of files. I have clearly not looked at all of them because I'm not 85 years old yet. I have not seen Bill Clinton presented as doing anything illegal in these files so far. There's a picture of him in a hot tub. That was not illegal. He was in a hot tub. He's in proximity, though. Like, he is one of a number of people who are just around and who could not have been unaware of Epstein's reputation, which everybody was aware of his reputation, and could not have not known everything. And that is a fine line to know who was actively abusing girls versus who knew about it and didn't say anything. And I would venture to say that Clinton falls into that second category, that he just knew. He knew, and he was a player, and he loved, that scene, but he also wasn't really close with Epstein. He was close with Ghislaine Maxwell, and Epstein just liked having a giant, Rolodex of people that he knew. And so he started going on like these Clinton Foundation trips to Africa with Clinton and things like that, but like they weren't that close. But you know what? He's Bill Clinton and he's going to make his own choices. And I hope if any of those choices, follow along these lines, that will become clear. Okay. From Sylvia, can we know some signal chats to link up to with others? This will be my last question. Maybe. God, I have to think of how to do that. I think that might be just something to like ask around, because I don't know how like covert the signal chats have to be. We've seen that people can get into signal chats. We've seen that things can go wrong with signal chats. I would ask around maybe and see if you can join up with some, because I'm sure there are way more than what I have on mine. But there are quite a few. From Dr. Snoo, would a Discord help coordinate? I worry about Discord because I think it's not intuitive to a lot of people who aren't really into more tech. Like even for me, I'm not great at Discord. I think almost like something like a Google Drive is a little bit simpler and easier for people to see things and to have like documents where we can all collaborate. I think that might be easier. And I just say that because I think of like Reddit and Discord and things like that. And I know that if we have people who are not, if they're older, if they're just not into tech as much, those can be a little bit more complicated. I would love it, Lawrence, if that was a BAM sponsored project. I would love it. I would love that. Because Lawrence is a genius. He's a tech genius. He's my guru. Yeah, guys, we're in the last couple of minutes. We did it. We did our first episode. I survived. I hope that was enjoyable. I hope you got some information. We'll do these each week. We'll round out the week with like a deep dive of the things that we're finding, not just like the hot topics that we're seeing hit social media, but some of the more intense things that we find kind of lurking below the surface. But I really appreciate you being here. I would ask that all of you guys go off on Substack if you're on there. And go find Blue Amp Media and subscribe to them. They have free content. They're amazing. I publish through them. We have a great team working together to bring you true and accurate and interesting information as the world turns. And then also, if you'll come hang out with me, I'm the Panicked Writer, or you can just find me as Ellie Leonard. Again, I have no paywall. Because I think information should be free. But I also work from home, and I'm really grateful for the people who have been willing to get a paid subscription. So if you can afford a paid subscription, they're pretty cheap. I keep mine at $5. You can subscribe to Blue Amp as well. That'd be really great. And we did it. And this is, we got to write the story, guys. So if you are ready, I need you to put on your cape. I need you to help me to write the end. We need a the end for this story. And yeah, I guess that's it. And I guess we'll see you next week. I love you all. And thanks for joining in. Bye.